Cool, everybody, Coach Rab here, and welcome to another Kilted Chess Noob video. Now, remember, to be clear, I am not a chess coach. I'm a health and wellness coach that is learning to play chess better. And the whole point of these videos is to hopefully inspire you to start the game or to improve on the game, and certainly not quit when the going gets tough, ideally. So today's lesson is all about do not blunder. So this was one of the very first tips that I received online. And so I can't even remember what video it was. It was like how to get better at chess. Number one, don't blunder. Sounds simple, right? Now, what is a blunder? Blunder is a catastrophic error when you basically make a move that leaves your pieces wide open. And it's frustrating because it can happen in the game when you're too busy focusing on what you're attacking. You're like, right, I'm going for this. And you make your moves, and then you've left the back door open, and one of your key pieces, a rook, a queen, or anything else gets taken. You're like, oh, why did I do that? You often feel stupid that you've done it, that you didn't see it, you weren't thinking, but you can be forgiven because sometimes you're too busy focusing on what you're doing, you forget about what the consequences of certain moves has. So by ensuring that you don't make blunders is one of the first lessons that I learned. And by doing so, it was a case of just double checking each move. Before you make the move, mentally say, right, does anything get left open when I move this? And if the answer is yes, then don't move it, right? Or make other moves first, and so on and so forth. So what I'm going to show you is a game that I was playing against a friend. And to give you a bit of background about this particular game, the friend of mine, I'd got into them playing chess. We'd started a 7-day move timer on daily, which meant you had loads of time to play move. And I was white, and I played the first move right off the bat. And I think it was about 3 or 4 days later, they finally got into it and started playing their moves. Now, at that point, it was a Saturday evening, and I think I was 3 or 4 glasses of wine down at that point. And he played his move. I was like, great, we've got a game on. And off we went. So I will take you through the moves as it happened in real time. And I was white, so I was playing the Vienna. So effectively, I started off with e4, which is basically the pawn that's right in front of the king. It's quite a common opening, right? So this individual was playing black, and they said, you know what, they're going to give it a go. So they played a really strange move, which was moving the a pawn. Now, the reason that's a strange move is that basically playing the outside pawns doesn't open up much in the early stage. Generally, you want to try and take control of the center. That's my understanding of it. So when you're playing the wide moves, usually if you've got some sort of complicated opening, that might work, but try and take the center. So anyway, they played the wide one. I was then playing my typical Vienna, so I do e4, then I bring my knight out to c3, basically, and then that knight is protecting my pawn through, oh, can't move that there. Yeah, it's protecting the pawn that I've just played. My opponent then moved out his rook. Now, this is what we're talking about blunders here. If you look closely, my f bishop, right, my f bishop has got eyes all the way on his rook. Basically, he has blundered his rook. Now, in the game of chess, different pieces have different values, okay? Pawns are worth 1. Your bishops and knights, that's your horses and your little religious characters, are worth 3. A rook is worth 5 because they're very powerful pieces. They control the channels and forget the files and the ranks and the files. That's the right terminology. So to trade a bishop, my white bishop, for his rook is quite a good trade. And the reason it's a trade is because when I take that, which I do in the next move, okay, I took it, he's going to naturally take back with his pawn, which is what happened, right? Now, at the time, I was 3 or 4 glasses of wine down, and this friend of mine was just getting back into chess, so it's completely understandable. It takes him a few games. It took me, I think, 5 to 10 games to start getting back into it, and I was making mistakes all over the shop. So I felt bad to take their piece, but it's part of the game. But I thought, right, it's going to be an easier night at the office, right, because the person's a bit rusty. So slurped down the wine and carried on. So I started on my development. And if you notice along the left-hand side, there's an evaluation bar. It's white all the way up the side at the moment and a little bit black at the top. Now, you don't see that when you're playing. That's because I've got game review on. You find that out afterwards. So the evaluation bar is saying I'm like plus 2.7. So I'm in a very good position here, and we're barely a few moves in. Not even 7 moves in. I'm in a very, very good position here. So as we go along, you'll see that that evaluation bar will fluctuate. Now, I was making my development here. I was feeling quite confident. Now, my next developing move is normally bringing my knight out. Okay, so he brought his knight out. My next move would be my G knight, normally moving into F3. That's what I normally do, right? And for whatever reason, I pushed the pawn through it forwards. Now, at that time, I remember thinking, well, he's brought his knight, I'm going to create what's known as a tempo, right? And forcing your opponent to lose tempo. A tempo is, he's going to have to move that knight again, right? Because if he doesn't move it, I'm going to bingo him, right? So he's just moved his knight, and I'm going to force him to move again. So I've pushed that pawn forward, and it forced him to push back. Fine, right? Then I pushed the next pawn forward to reinforce it. Now, I was so focused on this that I forgot what my normal opening would be, which was, I was telling you about this knight to G3, this knight move, right? For whatever reason, still haven't done it yet. And at the time, in my head, rightly or wrongly, probably rightly at this stage, I'm taking as much space as I can. I'm pushing forwards, right? Chess is a war game. It's a strategy game. It's about the more space that you can eat up with all the pieces supporting one another, you're going to help yourself. So I was developing a lot of space. If you see there, I'm controlling the middle. I've got these three pawns in the middle. The knight's backing up, or will be backing up, and I've got other pieces to develop. And at this moment in time, he's got what's known as two double pawns. Now, they're a problem because, yes, he can move the front pawn, but the other one can't move behind until the other one's moved. So double pawns are not great. We'll discuss that as we move forward. So anyway, cut long story short, I was like, yes, everything's going great. I'm enjoying life. Happy days. Then my opponent brings out his bishop. Now, bishops are great for controlling diagonals, right? They're long-range artillery pieces. They can swoop in from across the board and cause problems. Okay, so as you can imagine, it's like, right, okay, he's brought that out. That's a normal developing move. Now, as I said, normally I would put my knight there. Okay, and put the knight onto F3, and I wouldn't be concerned because if he would take it with his bishop, I have this pawn to back up, right? So away we go. At that time, I was a couple of glasses of wine down. I was thinking to myself, right, develop as much space, and thought I could get away with loads. So yeah, so normally I would bring the knight out from here into that position there, and I didn't. For whatever reason, if I'd done that move, if I brought the knight out, then it was going to protect this pawn. Now, the reason you have to protect this pawn is if he swoops in and takes that pawn, he can then take my rook, and there's nothing I can do about it, right? So I was like, I should have moved this knight to here. But I didn't, and I don't know why I didn't. I have no idea why I didn't. Instead, I decided to pull this bishop out to the middle, and in my head at the time, I think I was trying to reinforce both these pawns with that bishop, protecting them, taking solid defense in the center. And of course, game review, if you notice that bar down the bottom, I'll just push them both back. 1 minute I'm 3.0, white is dominating. That one blunder changes everything, puts black in control. And guess what? My opponent took full advantage of it, swooped in, gets a great review by the game engine, takes that pawn. Now, not only did he take that pawn, right, if you look at it, he swooped in and he stole one. You might think, oh, pawn's only worth one, but that's not the main point. There is nothing I can do about that bishop before he's then going to take this rook. And that rook's quite valuable. I've went and made a very similar blunder to what he made at the start of the game. I was like, oh. So then, Drunk Rab was like, right, okay, I'm on thingy mode. So I was trying to then block him in. I'll say rightly or wrongly, but wrongly. So I moved my knight in, trying to kind of trap off his escape squares. He then took my rook, as he should have done. I pulled in my queen. He then also, he made another development move, bringing the knight across. He probably should have just got rid of, dispatched me nice and quick, but there's not a lot I could do about it at that point. I then castled. The reason I wanted to do that was at the moment I had nothing to hit his bishop with. Now that I've castled, the rook's going to bingo him, but it didn't matter. It was too late. He then took my knight as well, and then I finally bingoed him back with my queen. Now, if you look at the evaluation bar, black is plus 3.0. That one move, that one blunder changed the face of the game. And it's funny, I've never sobered up so quickly in my life. Because all of a sudden I was like, I don't want to lose this here, you know. I had so much control in the centre. I was feeling confident, feeling cocky probably. I was being a Kilted chess knob, basically, and overlooked something, and it changed everything. From that point onwards, it was an uphill battle. And, you know, if you watch the evaluation bar as we develop our moves as we go along, he starts creeping in, a couple of moves rightly or wrongly. He started to lose some of his supremacy as I'm creeping back. And I managed to fight back over a period of goodness knows how many moves. That move by me was another blunder. If you look at that, I had the knight in position. I pulled it all the way back, or it was a miss they called it, but it puts him in a strong position. What it said I should have done was what's known as en passant. En passant is when he's moved his pawn 2 spaces at the start. So when a pawn's kicking off, it can jump 2 spaces. Everything after that can move 1. And an en passant move is if the opponent has jumped 2 spaces with their pawn on their opening move. On the very next move, your pawn, even though it's side by side, because normally pawns need to be stabbing to the diagonals, it can jump in and take that pawn, and it jumps ahead of it. So the pawn vanishes and your pawn gets in front. It wanted me to have, the game engine said en passant. I wasn't paying attention, and I moved my knight back to target his knight. I wanted his knight out of there at that time, if I remember my frame of mind. He brought his queen across, and we ended up this long uphill battle where I slowly started to pick away, and it took some time. He put his queen in the corner, put me in trouble, bunch of moves here and there. Eventually, as we played on, he then made a boo-boo, thankfully, which allowed me to cause problems, okay? So when he moved his queen, I was able to get my rook in for the check, the king would move, and then I was able to get my queen in to create the checkmate. It was protected by this pawn here, so it's attacking. The king can't go here because of the pawn, because again, they attack sideways. It couldn't escape back because of the rook, couldn't escape back that way, and it couldn't take my queen again, because I've mentioned before, because of the pawn. Anyway, that's a long, big, waffly way of saying that one blunder way back at the start of the game, okay, when I should have developed my knight. My move as part of the Vienna would have been to bring the knight out, and the reason why that'd be a good move, 1, it protects that pawn, but 2, that knight was also protected by both the pawn and my queen. So had he tried to take, I could have taken either with the pawn, but likely the queen, and if you see the evaluation bar, I would have still been winning. As it is, that's not what I played, and he bingoed me in the corner. And there was a huge, huge blunder. So my point to that is, not blundering first and foremost is one of the best ways that you can improve your game early on. And to do that is every time you go to make a move, have a look at what's open, okay? So you look at the board. So in that position, before I made that move, I should have looked at what was under threat. Now, his pawns on this left-hand side were not causing a threat to anything I had, so I wasn't too concerned, okay? His bishop, as I said, long-range piece, was attacking that pawn, right? And that pawn had no defenders. That's the key thing. So when you're looking at what things are being attacked and whether they can be defended. As I said before, if I moved my knight, that knight would have been getting defended by both the pawn and the queen. So it would have had defenders, okay? So it's looking at what is being attacked. Other than that, nothing else he had out at that moment in time was attacking any of my pieces. So before I moved any move, and like I say, I made that bishop move. At the time in my head, I was thinking, right, reinforce this center, give these pawns some coverage. Left myself wide open. So in order to prove in the early game, my recommendation for you is to not blunder. Double check all your moves. And to do that, have a look at what's being attacked, and then also have a look at what would happen when you move that piece. Because in some cases, you can move a piece and it leaves you wide open. And unfortunately, like for example, there might be a case in the game where you move a pawn to take something, right? Let's just say, for example, he'd moved this pawn here. Well, it won't let me do that right now. But if he'd moved his pawn and I took it and left my queen open, it might allow somebody else to get in an attack and take out your queen. So it's about looking at what you're leaving open. So don't leave the back door open. Try your best not to blunder. One of the rules I have with my own chess game is every time I blunder, I add an extra tenner to my pension pot. It's a joke I've got running with my dad, because whenever he makes a boo-boo too, he puts extra money into one of his savings. And I said, well, he's always on me for pension. I put an extra tenner into the pension pot. So future me is laughing right now. Future me is like, cheers Rab for that blunder. Current me is a tenner short because that's a tenner I could have spent on beer or whiskey or whatever else. So this game certainly led to game blunder. Like I said, I managed to pull off the win in the end, but that was massive. So if you can prevent blunders, if you can just double check your moves, first and foremost, look at what the consequences would happen when you move. Is anything getting left open? And if you're unsure, have a look at what's being attacked. Okay, what lines are getting attacked, especially by the long range pieces, because those are the ones that when you move them, long range pieces like your bishop's long range, rooks are long range. So sometimes moving a piece leaves a long range weapon open, like a ballistic missile, launches in from afar, wipes out your pieces. Okay, so try your best not to blunder.